A very good afternoon to all. Welcome to the webinar series, Preparedness and Management of Maternal, Reproductive, Newborn and Mental Health during COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Vinita Suri, Professor and Head, Department of Obs and Gynae. Myself, Dr. Madhu Gupta, Professor, Department of Community Medicine and School of Public Health from Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education Research, Chandigarh, along with the UNFPA, have organized these webinars. The objective of these webinars is to build the capacity of health professionals, including doctors and nursing staff, in preparing the healthcare facilities and managing the maternal, reproductive, neonatal, and postnatal cases with the best care possible under COVID-19 pandemic situation, so as to ensure personal protection of the healthcare personnel, continuity in healthcare services, and reduction in maternal and neonatal morbidity and mortality. Hence, we have organized 4 such sessions. Today is our first webinar, and Dr. Kirti Iyengar from National Program Officer, UNFPA, will be taking a session on antenatal care during COVID-19 pandemic, which will be followed by preparation during labor room and training of staff for managing COVID-19 pandemic by Dr. Neelam Agarwal, who is a professor of Department of Obs and Gynae, PGI Chandigarh. Our next webinar is on 30th April, and it will cover postpartum care in COVID-19 suspect or positive patient by Dr. Meenakshi Rohila, who is a professor of Department of Obs and Gynae, PGI, and newborn care in COVID-19 suspect or positive patients by Dr. Shiv Sanjan Saini, who is a professor of neonatology at APC PGIMAR. In the third webinar, we are covering family planning services during COVID-19 pandemic and abortion services during COVID-19 pandemic by Dr. Rimpi Singla, who is also faculty in Obs and Gynae PGI Chandigarh, and Dr. Kirti Iyengar from UNFPA. This is on 2nd May. The last webinar is on 5th May, and in this webinar, we will be covering managing gender-based violence during COVID-19 pandemic by Mrs. Anuja Gulati from UNFPA Maharashtra, and also how to deal with the mental health and psychosocial issues associated with COVID-19 infection by Dr. Sandeep Grover, who is a professor of Department of Psychiatry, PGI Chandigarh. So with this brief introduction, I would like to invite Dr. Kirti Iyengar from who's a National Program Officer in UNFPA New Delhi, to deliver her talk on antenatal care during COVID-19 pandemic situation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. The topic, thank you, Dr. Madhu, for introducing me and for initiating this series of reproductive and maternal and newborn care during the COVID scenario. So I will be talking of the antenatal care during the COVID scenario. And there have been many resources which have been developed in the last 2 months on the topic of COVID and pregnancy care. There have been guidelines from ministry, there have been some guidance from AIMS and also FOTSI. At the same time, UNFPA has also developed some technical brief for antenatal care services and for maternal care services. One second. Just 1 second. Next slide, please. Chiranjit, can you please go to the next slide?
Ma'am, it is yours. Screen sharing is on.
Some problem. I'm not able to go to the next slide. Yeah. So what are the objectives of the maternity care during the COVID pandemic? So as Dr. Madhu already mentioned, we have 2 objectives. One is very important, that we have to protect all the healthcare providers who are providing maternity care, because they don't know who has come with a positive or who is a suspected case or in the incubation period. At the same time, we have to also provide the safe and effective maternity care to women. What we don't want is that we have been reading in the newspapers that some woman went and she was denied care, or she was referred from a PHC to another facility, and then there are poor outcomes. So we want that the optimal care is provided to women and her baby, as well as the health providers are also protected. So first we will be discussing as to what is the advice to prevent to the pregnant women who have no symptoms, and what advice should we give them about ANC. There has been a lot of, in the past months, there was a lot of different messages that were coming from different agencies. Some were saying that the women should delay their ANC visits, and some were saying they should just consult on phone. So the guidance based on the Ministry of Health's guideline, as well as AIMS and other guidance, all the international WHO UNFPA guideline is that the women can reduce, postpone, or increase the interval between the ANC visits. However, it does not mean that the ANC visits have to be stopped. Women should, when they go for ANC visits, they should not have too many visitors with them. They should carry just at the most one attendant with them. However, if they have any risk, if they are high risk women, then they have had any potential or actual complications, then they certainly, based on the advice from the doctor, they should go more often. What has been advised is that the women should have minimum 4 antenatal contacts, and approximately they can be around 12 weeks, 20 weeks, 28 weeks, and 36 weeks. So what it means is that yes, they may not have 8 to 10 antenatal visits. If they are absolutely without complications, they will have approximately 4 ANC visits. Now, about how to provide ANC. When the ANC is being provided by a facility, and right now we are not talking only of the medical colleges, we are also talking of the district level facilities, the CHCs, the BHCs, every facility. So the number of women who are attending the clinics each day has to be reduced. We have to also ensure that the support staff is less. We only have as much support staff as needed. Then if some of the antenatal care can be provided instead of the hospital, if it can be provided in the community setting, it should be encouraged. For example, instead of a district hospital, if we can provide the same ANC at a PHC, that should be encouraged. And then ANC, as you all know, has 2 parts. One is the part where we are just stating the history or counseling the woman. And the other is the part where we are doing a physical examination of the woman. So what is recommended by WHO and UNFPA is that these 2 parts should be to some extent separated. The part about the inquiry and the history taking and counseling, that can be provided sometimes in outdoors also, as long as we are not asking any very confidential questions, or in a setting where we can easily maintain a 1 meter distance. When we are physically touching the woman, that part should be done a little quickly. It does not mean that we should compromise on the quality. We have to still do the same things, maintaining the quality, but rather than spreading it over a long time, we should try to bring all the examinations and lab tests together. As I already mentioned, when we are doing the non-physical assessment, that can be done in the open environment and maintain 1 meter distancing. And some of the assessments can be done over phone also. Recently, UNFPA has developed a guidance about the teleconsultations for ANC visits. But what I want to emphasize is that the teleconsultation is not a substitute for complete ANC visits. It's just in addition to the 4 minimum antenatal care contacts. Now, when women come for antenatal care, there has to be information provided to them about the danger signs and about the birth preparedness. Birth preparedness means a discussion with her, especially in the last trimester, as to where she's going to deliver, how she will reach the hospital, and other similar issues. And every time we should also try to assess whether she has any possible COVID symptoms. And whether her pregnancy is a high-risk pregnancy, that assessment also we have to do. And we have to, at the same time, whenever she comes to the facility, we have to do her blood pressure, all the blood tests, abdominal palpation, and when needed, ultrasound as well. And the plan for each woman has to be developed in an individualized manner. So some women will require more frequent reviews because of the high risk or because of the bad obstetric history or some other complication, while some might be low risk and they may require less visits. Then, so as I already said, that what do we tell the woman? We have to tell her that if you are in very early pregnancy, you may defer the ANC visit by a few weeks. Few weeks means maybe 2 weeks. So if instead of say 16 weeks, if she had to go for a visit, maybe she can go at 18 weeks. That's all. And she has to also follow all the instructions of the doctor, nurse, and take all the medications. Those who are living in the rural areas, if they can go for ANC to a nearer PHC, CHC, or a private hospital, it's better. And similarly, for minor problems, they can consult their doctor on phone. Sometimes, as we all know, women have very minor problems of pregnancy like constipation or nausea. However, for any emergency or high-risk pregnancy, they should not wait at home and they must visit the hospital. If they have any TROVID-related symptoms like fever, cough, difficult breathing, aches, pains, nasal congestion, loss of taste, smell, then they must seek the medical care early. During the hospital visit, they should ensure that they maintain about 1 meter distance from others. And of course, we have to give her all the general advice that we keep given about COVID prevention, which is about hand washing, social distancing, avoid touching face, etc. Now, what is the role of teleconsultation for ANC for non-COVID pregnant women? So teleconsultation is in addition to the contact visits, and sometimes occasionally it can replace a visit. And especially if the maternal observations or tests are not needed. Suppose a visit has been done and all checkups have been done, all lab tests have been done, then maybe instead of the one of the visits which would have occurred after 2 weeks, we can do a teleconsultation. Some of the advice for home monitoring can also be driven. For example, woman can do her daily fetal movement counts and we can provide a dietary advice. So what are the types of questions that could be asked during teleconsultation? We can ask in general how she feeling, we can confirm the gestation with the woman, we can ask her whether she has identified any, like in her last ANC visits when she had gone to a hospital, were any problems identified? How does she feel is the growth of the baby? Because women also can feel whether her stomach is increased inside or not. We can talk to her about the fetal movements. We can ask her whether she's eaten and drinking well. We can give her dietary advice. We can also find out whether she's taken all her medications. And if she's not able to tolerate, we can give her the information about alternative medications. Similarly, we can ask her about the signs of UTI or constipation. We can ask her about other danger signs like vaginal bleeding, severe headache, blurred vision, fever, severe weakness, severe abdominal pain, or fast or difficult breathing. In any of these problems, we must advise her to immediately come to the hospital. As I said, we have to already discuss with her about her birth preparedness plan. We have to, because we know that the depression is also a very common situation in antenatal period, we have to also find out whether she's stressed, and if needed, we can call her for an assessment. And as you all know, during the COVID scenario, the cases where gender-based violence occurs has increased. So we can even ask her whether she's feeling safe at home, and at least we can do an assessment of gender-based violence and at least advise her where she can go. We can fix the date of next appointment. And then we have to also discuss with her what she will do if she has a labor pains or any other danger signs. And then what advice will we give her about the place of delivery? We are not going to advise her to deliver at home. We have to tell her that she has to come to a health facility. We have to also tell her that if she has no pregnancy problems, maybe she can go to a smaller level health facility like a CHC, PHC, or a private hospital. But if she has any problems, complications, or high-risk pregnancy, then they should be told to deliver in a hospital that has the C-section facilities if it is needed. Then now we are shifting to the care of the pregnant women with any suspected or confirmed COVID infection. So all of you probably know that the pregnant women are not more likely to contract the COVID infection than the general population. Their risk is almost the same. And some other viral infections are worst in pregnant women due to the physiological changes or relative immunosuppression. However, with COVID, there is no such evidence so far. And the disease is not aggravated by the pregnancy unless there are other comorbidities. Now, one other question is, which very often people ask, what is the effect of COVID-19 on fetus? So if a pregnant woman has COVID infection, what is the effect on fetus? So there is no increased risk of miscarriage or early pregnancy loss. And right now, there is no clear evidence of vertical transmission. There is no clear evidence of transmission through genital fluids. About the preterm birth, there is no clear evidence. However, a few studies have shown that about 30% of the babies were born preterm, but it is unclear whether it was iatrogenic or spontaneous. Right now, there is no evidence of intrauterine fetal infection, congenital malformations, or any effect on fetal growth. So if there is a suspected trace in pregnancy, if you are in the antenatal OPD and there is a woman who has the symptoms which suggest the respiratory symptoms, what is the process to be followed? We have to, of course, we have to inform the local authorities who are responsible for COVID in the district. And then if she fits the right lines as determined by ICMR, we have to provide the test for COVID infection. And then the test has to be done urgently. The samples have to be sent, but it does not mean that we delay the obstetric care to be provided. So we have to wait for the results of the test and we can treat her as a confirmed case till then, but we don't have to delay the obstetric care. And the management has to be provided by a multidisciplinary team, which will include an infectious disease specialist who will decide whether the woman will remain under home isolation or she needs admission. As you know, in India right now, all confirmed cases are being advised admission, but overall the guidance from WHO and various other agencies is, and maybe when we have, like suppose we have more cases and the hospitals may not have place, then maybe the home isolation might be advised for confirmed cases. And the obstetrician will decide on the obstetric emergency or labor delivery issues. We have to treat them as confirmed cases until the test results are available. Now, how will you assess a suspected case in obstetric emergency? Suppose in the emergency room a woman comes who is a suspected case. Then the triage and screening needs to take place for all the women before they enter the health facility. It is preferable that we don't get everybody inside. In some of the health facilities, they have managed to set up a triage center, which is a little outside, closer to the reception area. And in some of the facilities like CHCs, they have even set it up in the outdoors. So if possible, it should be a little outside the main area. But however, it will depend on the facility to facility. And then women who have suspected COVID, they have to be isolated. They have to be kept in an isolated room if possible. And if they are coming for ANC and we know that they are displaying some symptoms, respiratory symptoms, then either they have to be seen at the end of the clinic day if possible. If we have, like, if they just have minor flu symptoms, we are not even suspected COVID, but we have to see them at the end of the day or at least in a separate room. Now, if it's a case who's a suspected or confirmed COVID case, then what other advice do we have to give it? In very mild cases where the self-isolation might be advised, or if they are in the COVID healthcare center, then the routine ANC appointments can be delayed until the recommended period of isolation is over. And the woman has to follow all the precautions of isolation, like having a mask, keeping distance from others. She has to keep herself well hydrated and mobile. And if there are any concerns that the woman's health condition is not good enough, or there is any suspicion that her fetus condition is not good enough during the period of isolation, then she has to be advised to be in the designated hospital, which is a designated COVID hospital. Additional care may be provided if she has any complications. If suppose she goes from home to the hospital, then she has to either use a private transport, and if ambulance is needed, she should tell the call center staff and the ambulance staff in advance that she is a suspected or confirmed case of COVID. Now, in terms of the confirmed cases, I'm not going into the clinical management, but all that I'm saying is that the international recommendation is that for asymptomatic women without any comorbidities, no obstetric emergency, she's not in labor, home isolation is possible. But as I said, in India, we are admitting everyone. The fetal monitoring has to be done frequently, either through Doppler or ultrasound. And ANC visit has to be, if possible, if the woman's condition is absolutely fine, then ANC visit can be delayed till the isolation period is over. However, if she needs an admission, she will go to an isolation room. The staff has to wear appropriate PPE and follow all the IPC measures. And whether she needs an ICU admission, that criteria will be the same as other COVID cases. This is a flow chart which I have already discussed, so I'm not going into the detail. Basically, it says that if the woman is suspected to be having any fever, cough, and any symptoms, and we have to first trigger a surgical face mask to put on, and then follow all the procedure like testing, and based on the test results, then we have to manage her. Now, this part I think Dr. Neelam will also cover. that women with the acute respiratory infection, if they are there, then we have to prepare for the trigen in the facility. So as I already said, we have to keep adequate space for the trigen, and the wait-in room chairs should also be ideally apart. The family members should preferably wait outside in order to avoid the overcrowding. And there has to be very clear signage for symptoms in such a facility. And the health workers have to use PPE properly. And we have to also clean the area in between the consultations. Now, I want to very briefly touch upon the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare's guideline on the management of pregnancy during COVID. They were released on the 14th of April. Basically, as you are all aware that there were this Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan, by which on the 9th of every month, ANC services were provided in private hospitals and in the other health facilities. So that has been stopped till the further information. Similarly, the village health and nutrition days, which are the day where the ANM goes to the village and provides an ANC service once a month, that has also been suspended for the time being. And ANC services are to be provided on a walk-in basis as per the standard protocols. And during the ANC period, the availability of the iron, folate, and calcium and other medicines has to be ensured by the ANM. And as I already said, for all the high-risk women, they have to be trapped. But at the village level, if it's a rural woman, the ANM and ASHA have to continue to trap them very frequently. And especially for all the women who are in the last trimester, they have to prepare a list and keep telephonic contact with them. Now, in order to ensure the safe institutional delivery, each of the subcenters has to prepare a list of the due list of all the pregnant women who are going to deliver in the next 3 months. However, if it appears that the woman lives in a very remote area and may not be able to reach the health facility, ASHAs might give the home use of misoprostol, which is driven to prevent the postpartum hemorrhage. However, she should still be told to try to come to the facility using an ambulance. Each pregnant woman has to be linked to an appropriate health facility for delivery, and that plan has to be prepared by the PHCMO. And then one other important point in ministry's guideline is that the ambulances have to be divided into 2, COVID and non-COVID. So the non-COVID patients must be transferred only in the non-COVID ambulance, and the COVID patients have to be transferred in the COVID ambulance. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Kirti, for this enlightening talk. And I'm sure there must be too many questions because all of you are involved, many of you are involved in taking care of antenatal women. Before we take up question, I would like to invite our next panelist, Dr. Neelam Agarwal, who is a professor of department in the Department of Obs and Gynecology. She will be taking a talk on how you will be preparing the labor room and how you're going to train the staff in the labor room to deal with COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Madhu, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'll be basically concentrating on the preparation of maternity units for delivery of these patients who are either COVID-19 positive or who are the suspects. And also training of staff for managing these patients. Make it full screen, please. Yeah. So I'll be focusing on basically COVID-19 patients management from obstetrician point of view for the maternal and fetal well-being and preparation of the maternity units, especially labor room and labor room OTs, prevention of transmission, safety of healthcare workers and other staff, and proper training of the staff for having that safety and exposure of transmission, prevention of transmission. So it's a very challenging situation because it's a rapidly evolving situation. Every day it changes. And this is the first ever pandemic with novel coronavirus CoV-2. And there have been no specific recommendations and guidelines so far from the experience in the last 4 or 5 months since the first reporting of CoV-2 corona positive patient in Wuhan. And because of this limited experience, most of the guidelines go by the previous H1N1 and MERS epidemics. So as outbreak continues to evolve, we are learning every day about this virus. So just to set the ball rolling, I have made few introductory slides, but I'm not going to repeat as Dr. Kirti has already gone through them and everybody knows about the general thing about coronavirus. And human to human transmission is the most important thing which is unique about this virus. And the incubation period and transmission by droplets, indirectly by fomites, and especially airborne transmission may be possible, and in specific settings, especially in aerosol generating procedures, for example, at the time of endotracheal intubation, bronchoscopy, tracheostomy, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, etc., where we have to be very, very careful about the PPE use. So these are the elements of standard precautions everybody knows, from hand hygiene, respiratory etiquettes to waste management. And this is hand hygiene, Suman K technique, hand washing techniques, and WHO 5 movements. Every time, at the time of these 5 movements, that hand washing techniques should be properly undertaken. By 20 minutes, hand rub with soap and water or with the sanitizer. So these are the respiratory, and use of disinfectants for the surfaces and cleaning the atmosphere, and then waste management precautions. These I am not going to touch. And this guidance for management of pregnant women we will be taking in COVID-19 pandemic. And these are basically based on ICMR guidelines. And this is a comprehensive assessment done by ICMR and given these guidelines after taking in consideration ACOG, RCOG, FOGC, and Lancet publications. So preparation of maternity unit involves isolation area or a isolation ward, and a second labor room area isolated, preferably if possible, and a second OT for these COVID-19 patients, with a separate area for the newborns of these mothers. And there should be appropriate and sufficient supply of appropriate personal protective equipment, as I will detail later on in my presentation. And there should be proper adherence to infection control practices. And so there should be good training of each and every person, whosoever is involved in the management of these patients, that those persons know about the personal protective equipment and infection control practices to prevent transmission to others. So guidelines for obstetrical healthcare personnel is at the time of screening area or triage, where testing according to national guidelines, patients have to be separated for whosoever need testing. And there should be planned optimal number and use of PPE at the different stations, at screening area, triage, during the waiting period, in the delivery suites, and in the OTs. And there should be all efforts to prevent transmission, hand hygiene and adequate distancing to be maintained at all the areas. And ICMR has made it mandatory to maintain registry of pregnant women in COVID pandemic with proper data. And there is a proper form of ICMR which has to be filled along with the sampling of these pregnant women from the containment areas especially. So these guidelines for testing, they keep on changing, and the latest have been to test all the women within 5 days who are expected to deliver within next 5 days. In fact, next 2 weeks. And in case a positive patient or a suspect patient, person under investigation is admitted, we have to notify the infection control team central in that hospital according to the hospital's policy. So principles of obstetric management include comprehensive assessment of the mother, taking detailed history at the outset whenever the mother is admitted, and she should be given informed information regarding effect of COVID on her pregnancy, and planning has to be made at that time only as to whether what we are doing planning for her delivery, means where she will labor and whether she is being left for normal delivery or being taken up for cesarean section. Delivery of these patients have to be undertaken in a designated COVID hospital, and no mother is to be denied or the treatment not to be delayed just because she is COVID positive. And COVID positive patients, they have to be taken care of by a multidisciplinary team involving the infectious disease people, and all teams should be remain informed at the time patient is admitted. And trained staff should be there for coordinated care of the patient, for safety of the patient as well as for the safety of the healthcare personnel. Patients should be taken care of in the isolation room, and at all times saturation should be more than 94%. Sepsis needs to be kept in mind in these patients, especially. Proper use of proper personal protective equipment and taking care of infection control measures is the key to a safe delivery for the mother and as well as for the healthcare personnel, and limiting the onward transmission to others. So during the intrapartum care, all people attending to the patient should be in proper PPE. Patient should be masked at all the times, including second stage. Infection control measures to be enforced at all times, and plan with minimal staffing, but yet ensure safe and optimal care to the mother with immediate with availability of further staff if any operative intervention is required, and continuous maternal and fetal monitoring by the comprehensive CTG monitors, which record vitals, maternal vitals, oxygen saturation, as well as the CTG at the same time, would be good for these patients, because everything is coming on the monitor, and so there is less physical interaction with the patient. So the single asymptomatic attendant, as advised worldwide, can be there with the patient with proper attire. Proper PPE to be worn by the attendant also, including gown, head cap, mask, and gloves and the shoe covers. So labor analgesia is not contraindicated. Epidural is not contraindicated. In fact, ACOG recommends epidural analgesia in labor in the early phase only, so that in case a cesarean is needed, this epidural can be topped up, and need of GA is reduced. So patient should be taken care of, good hydration, monitoring of labor, and symptoms of deterioration also must be kept in mind. Mode of delivery is as per obstetrical need. Decision of cesarean section is on case-to-case basis, but in case the patient deteriorates, management has to be individualized, and by multidisciplinary assessment, if need be, cesarean for the maternal stabilization may be done. So inductions are done only if deemed essential. Otherwise, inductions to be avoided. If need be, antenatal steroids can be given unless patient is having severe sepsis. So in a case patient is critically ill, a pregnant woman who is critically ill should be managed as per that hospital's policy, either in a separate HDU or in that area where COVID-19 patients are being taken care of, and with all the facilities. Radiological investigations, if needed for the mother, are not to be denied. Abdominal shield for the fetus can be used. Full sepsis screen to be taken up in such patients, and antibiotics as per individualization. Caution with IV fluid management should be taken in pregnant patients, and time and mode of delivery according to the situation as the patient requires. In the postnatal care, vertical transmission may be there, but in the absence of any definite evidence, it is assumed that the infant is taken to be as query positive, and so the newborn has to be isolated from the other newborns. Newborn has to be in the separate room. Significance of transmission and its severity in the newborn is not known. There have been no recorded cases of vaginal secretions being tested positive or breast milk being tested positive, but still temporary separation is advised in a case who is COVID-19 positive or who is a suspect with person under investigations. But in case the rooming in is unavoidable technically, then measures to reduce exposure should be implemented. For example, physical barrier between the mother, plastic curtain between the mother and the baby, and as well as physical distancing more than 6 feet, and hand hygiene to be ensured. Mother has to be in mask. breastfeeding during the temporary separation of the mother and the baby, expression of breast milk is encouraged so that breast milk is not suppressed. A dedicated breast pump should be arranged for the mother, and before each touch, hand hygiene is to be stressed upon. And after use, whichever parts come in contact with the skin of the pump should be disinfected as per instructions from the manufacturer. Expressed breast milk should be fed to the baby by a healthy caregiver, and discharge of the mother and the baby should be done as per policy of the COVID-19 patients of that hospital. So till the time transmission bound precautions are there, after that only, and once the patient tests, once or twice the patient tests negative, only then discharge as per for other patients. So in the COVID OT, in case the woman requires a cesarean section, extra precautions to be taken in the COVID OT. This OT should be separate, and there should be availability of full cleanup as per infection control guidelines of the OT afterwards and before the next surgery. Minimum staff should be present at a given time, but at the same time, safety should not be undermined. All staff must wear appropriate personal protective equipment according to the aerosol generating procedures. For example, general anesthesia is aerosol generating procedure, whereas regional anesthesia is not. If general anesthesia is planned, all the teams have to don prior to GA, and FFP3, that is N95 mask, is to be worn. But if it is regional anesthesia, the operative team should enter the OR fully donned after the block is effected. Proper hand hygiene cannot be overemphasized, and names of teams should be well visible on the masks for coordination, as once they are all donned in, it is very difficult to recognize each other, and also to coordinate is quite difficult. So training of staff is a must for the proper coordination and for use of proper for PPE. So there can be training like hands-on training for the basic sessions, and once the whole staff has taken basic sessions, pre-operative and post-operative evaluation must be done for testing the training part, and then refresher trainings of the same. This should be a continuous ongoing phenomenon in the pandemic setting, because things keep on evolving. Proper use of PPE and proper handling of PPE after use is very, very important, and video presentations to teach donning and doffing should be a continuous ongoing everyday drill. And mock drills should be done so as to not panic during the actual time. So according to OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, PP is a specialized clothing or equipment worn by employee for protection against infectious materials. And goals and objectives of PP use in healthcare setting is to improve the personal safety and information about the selection and use of a particular PP and how to safely don and remove it. And then these are the basic PPs. Personal protective equipment should be either for respiratory protection, eye protection, and body protection. Eye protection also takes care of along with the eye, whole face. The principle is that no area of the person giving care should be exposed without a protective equipment. In the respiratory protective equipment, there are different type of masks and the respirators, either triple layer surgical masks or filtering face particles of level 1, 2, 3, and level 3 is N95 face masks. And then for aerosol generating procedures, there have to be FFP3 or F95. So all these equipments, whether respiratory, eye or body, different kinds of equipments, for example, for eye protection, goggles and face shields for the face protection, and for the body protection, either there should be a fluid resistant gown along with head and shoe cover, or a overall fluid resistant coverall from covering head to toe with additional foot shoe covers and face protection and hand protection by the properly fitting gloves, and they should be water resistant. Everything should be water resistant. Level of PPE means each PPE kit should be assembled according to the area where a person is working. For example, in the OPD, different kind of PPE is required, and in a non-COVID area, in a COVID positive area, in a COVID positive area with aerosol generating procedure, different kind of these things have to be mixed and matched and level of PP decided. So these are the different kinds of PP for different situations, for nose, mouth, eyes and face, and for the body, different kinds of PPEs. These are the different examples. And depending upon the type of exposure anticipated, for example, splash, as in cesareans, spray, touch, and category of isolation precautions, and durability and appropriate for the task, kind of PPE is selected. So how to check label of PPE? For example, for medical gowns PPE label can be checked according to AMI, Association for Advancement of Medical Instrumentation, because they test the products for resistance to liquid and viral penetration through several test methods specified, and their levels have served as the gold standard for manufacturing of medical gowns for their performance, and they are labeled from level 1 to level 4 and increasing protection from level 1 to level 4. For example, level 4 gown would be required in the case of operative procedures and aerosol generating procedures. And then these are the hazardous material suits according to OSHA. These are for the hazmat workers. They are from level A to D. Gowns are increasing in in protection level from 1 to 4. 4 is the maximum, but here it is in the decreasing order. A is the most protective and D is the least protective. And these are the coveralls from head to toe. Everything it covers from head to toe, and they are from A to D, labeled as A to D in United States, and these same are labeled as numbers, typed as numbers from 1 to 6 in Europe. So each protective equipment, each level can be, that label can be studied and then decided whether how much protective it will be. So EN 943 in the Europe and NFPA 1991 in the USA, these are the main international certifications. Then there are other certifications also of the different equipments from ANSI, ASTM, ISO, etc. So there are some do's and don'ts for the use of PPE. Work from clean to dirty, and limit opportunities for touch contamination to protect yourself, others, and environments, and never touch your face or adjust PPE with contaminated gloves. So that is the basic crux of minimizing the exposure, that don't touch your face at all with the gloves, and change gloves and gown immediately if it is heavily soiled, and discard in an appropriate manner, and never wash or reuse disposables unless meant for the same. So this is a video, donning and doffing video. Can we play this? This is donning and निकाल दो. आगे. Yeah, I think we will. I just wanted to share with you the little preview of the video, and these videos are available on the PGI website, and we will be sharing link with you with the. Otherwise, also anybody can visit PGI website and see these videos, and everybody is encouraged to see these videos time and again to have a mental picture as to how to do it, because by the time you enter the OT and you are going to take care of such these patients, some mental pressures and all, they may cloud your mind. And so if you are if you are aware of these videos again and again, you see them, you are well prepared. So key points, I will just come to the principles of protective equipment. Don before contact with the patient, and doff after you have done everything. Doffing is even more important than donning. And because when you have taken care of the patient, at the time of doffing, you carry the infection with you. So basically, PPE protects you from exposure, and you should know about what type of PPE is necessary and use it correctly. You use it judiciously. So the virus doesn't move. We have to stop moving the virus. Thank you. That's it.
So, thank you, Dr. Neelam. That was really very enlightening. And I must say that we as healthcare professionals, it is our responsibility to protect ourselves also, because unless we are protected, we will not be able to provide the services required. So with this, we
Just
we
1
end.
minute. I just wanted to share that these label of safety, personal PPE label, as to if when you have to buy it, how to check for the safety of PPE. If anybody wants, I can share with them individually, because of the lack of time, I have just gone through the basic broad principles, right?
Yeah, so we can share the email IDs of our panelists with you. If you want, you can directly contact them and you can ask your questions. So coming to the end of the session, that is the panel discussion. And we have two questions here. So we will take these questions one by one. So first question is from Divya Chaudhary. And she wants to know whether there is a transmission of COVID-19 possible by blood. So, Dr. Kirti, would you like to take this question?
Yeah, sure. So as we all know, COVID-19 is a respiratory, like it transmits through the respiratory passage by and large. And it's not a blood transmit, like there is no evidence thus far that the virus transmits through blood. And accordingly, there has not been any change in the guideline or criteria for the donors who come. However, we know that ideally a blood donor should be healthy. So if a person has just had a, say, COVID-19 infection, we should not be including him as a blood donor. And so far, there is no change even by CDC in the guidelines related to the blood transfusion.
Yeah, thank you. And the second question is from Priyanka Semwal, and she wants to know what will be the safety measures for newborn if the pregnant woman is corona positive at the time of delivery. So I would like to inform that we also have a next webinar which is focusing on newborn health. But if you would like to take up this question right now today, I mean, it's like most welcome. So, Dr. Neelam, would you like
Yes.
to respond to this question? Yeah.
Yes, yes. I have already shown during my presentation also
Okay.
that so far, whatever are the reports, no vaginal secretions have tested positive even in the positive patients for coronavirus. But presumably, still they assume that the baby, there may be some vertical transmission. So this newborn should be isolated in a separate room from the other newborns as well as from the mother. There should be a temporary separation from the mother of the baby till there are those transmission precautions are applied to the mother. Once the mother is declared negative, then the mother can be handed over the baby. Till that time, baby should be cared after by a healthy attendant. And mother,
Thank you.
mother can give expressed breast milk by using the breast.
Thank you. So, Dr. Kirti, there are a few couple of questions for you. Like, should all pregnant women be tested for COVID-19 infection to screen for cross infection from asymptomatic carriers?
So here we would go by the ICMR guidance, and what ICMR has sort of advised is that all pregnant women need not be tested for COVID. However, if the pregnant woman is residing in a cluster on containment area or in a large migration gathering or evacuees from hotspot districts, then if they present in labor or if their delivery is due in the next 5 days, then they should be tested even if they are asymptomatic. And they have also said that if such a woman arrives at a facility which does not have the testing facility, they should take the sample and they should provide her the tray, and while the test results might come whenever they will come after a day or two. That is the advice.
And what is the role of teleconsultation for antenatal checkups? Although you covered that, yeah, that's important.
Yeah, so as I already covered in my presentation, that teleconsultations, everybody is talking much more about teleconsultations nowadays. As we already discussed, that there can be a big role of teleconsultations for antenatal care and also for other services. Government of India has already issued guidelines for telemedicine during the period of COVID, and they have advised that all those services which do not need a direct contact between the patient and the doctor can be provided through teleconsultation also. So as we discussed, that if a pregnant woman needs to be touched and her investigations or any checkup has to be done by the doctor or nurse, they should go to the facility. But however, if we have to just check whether she's taken her iron tablets and she's fine and she has, fetal movements are fine, then we can replace some visits through a teleconsultation. So perhaps the WHO advises minimum 8 antenatal care visits, but Ministry of Health still in India follows a system of minimum 4 antenatal care visits. And I think the ministry has not said that they have to be relaxed, but we know that sometimes the doctors and the nurses, they advise the patient to come, very frequently, and the woman ends up having between 12 to 15 antenatal visits. So perhaps we can replace some of those visits by a teleconsultation so that the woman without any problem might have 4 to 6 antenatal visits.
Thank you. So we also have Dr. Neena Singla, who's a retired head from Government Multi-Speciality Hospital in Sector 16 and is the project faculty in this project. So I have a question for you to ask. Can patients with suspected and confirmed COVID-19 infection be admitted in the same isolation room?
Thank you, Dr. Madhu, and good afternoon to everyone. This is a very important question. Ideally, they should not be kept in the same room. They should be kept in separate rooms. The Government of India, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, they have taken care of this. They have designated 3 kinds of specialities, three kinds of places where you can keep these patients. One is the COVID care centers, where you can keep people with mild symptoms, and the other is the COVID care, dedicated COVID healthcare centers, and the third is dedicated COVID hospitals, where the tertiary care hospitals are there for severe patients, for patients with severe symptoms. So here in these cases, the suspected patients, they should be kept in a separate area. They should not be kept in the same area as the confirmed patients. And due to space constraints in a country like India, we may have to keep the confirmed patients in one room. So there we are, the suspected patients in one room. Then we have to maintain the distance of 1 meter, or we can have a curtain, like a barrier thing, and all patients should be wearing masks, and the healthcare workers who are looking after them, they should be wearing the PPEs.
Thank you so much. So we'll go to this last question to Dr. Neelam Agarwal. Should pregnant and breastfeeding women living with HIV/AIDS and with COVID-19 and their newborns be managed differently?
No, they have to be managed, means HIV precautions. Here we have to take universal precautions as for HIV we are taking, plus aerosol generating procedure precautions. That means respiratory droplet infection precautions, as well as the universal precautions as we are taking in the HIV patients. So dual precautions we have to take, in addition COVID-19 precautions also. And as far as breastfeeding is concerned, I have already elaborated on the breastfeeding. So these women, if they are breastfeeding in, if they have decided to breastfeed in, as far as their HIV status is concerned, if they want to breastfeed, but there should be a temporary separation from the COVID positive mother till the time she is considered negative. But in the meantime, she can give expressed breast milk by a dedicated breast pump and after the proper all hand hygiene, and by breast milk can be fed to the baby by the attendant.
So there are 4 more questions from the participants. Shall we take that if panelists agree? So one, Sushmita Sharma, she wants to ask whether all admitted patients antenatal to be tested for COVID. Dr. Kirti?
Yeah, so as I said that we, of course, you know, if the testing facilities are become so widely available and the private hospital or some other hospital decides to test, that is another thing. But if we follow the ICMR guidelines, then only those pregnant women who are coming from a cluster area or a hotspot area, they need to be tested, even if they are asymptomatic. Dr. Neelam, would you like to add anything to that?
No, this goes as per national policy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So next question is...
And
yeah.
same is for the guideline for screening of the attendants and health attendants from referral hospitals. These also have to be taken in as per guidelines from the national body.
But I think she is asking whether all admitted patients, whether they need to be tested. Those who are all admitted.
No, I'm that anonymous attending. Other question with guidelines for screening of the attendants and attendants from referral hospitals accompanying the patient. I'm just saying that screening, let's finish with the screening questions here only, no?
Mm-hmm. So you are basically answering any guidelines for screening of the attendants and sometimes health attendants from referral hospital who are accompanying the patient.
Yeah.
So is there any guideline on that?
No, still no guidelines. Means guidelines, whatever are the national guidelines, those only patients are being tested.
General guidelines.
Those people are only being tested, yes. And Anchal Deeman's question, I think has been already answered. Right, Anchal?
Yeah. How should we deal if the mother is COVID positive and the baby is COVID negative, and how do we go for breast? Yeah, that has already been answered by you. So Ravpreet Kaur Gill is asking that transmission through CSF and amniotic fluid. Is it possible?
So whatever literature shows, they have not shown the positivity in the amniotic fluid. CSF nobody has mentioned, but as far as it goes in the other secretions, it should also be, we should at the moment till anybody reports, so far no evidence of any positive sample from the amniotic fluid or vaginal secretions or breast milk or blood or CSF has not been mentioned.
Only fecal contamination, I think. Fecal samples have been tested positive in some.
Yeah, fecal samples are positive, yeah.
So that was all, and I'm really thankful to Dr. Kirti Iyengar, National Program Officer, UNFPA, for being part of this webinar. I'm thankful to Dr. Neelam Agarwal for giving this enlightening talk, and our panelist, Dr. Neena Singla, and Kiranjit, if you can see your face, because she is the person who has organized this webinar. I'm really thankful to you, and thank you all for listening. And we will take up your questions. If any question you have, kindly mail it to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.